I am so excited to welcome back to Pod Save America the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, Ben Wikler. Ben, good to see you.
Thanks, Tommy. It is good to see and hear you too.
I love Zooming with you because you have the most campaign office vibe. We got Tony Evers signs. We got big maps with counties on them. I assume there'll be push pins in there soon for various reasons.
Indeed. Yes, there'll be push pins. There may be string connecting the push pins. I've got my Tony Evers and I've got my Biden Harris 4x4 barn sign up on the facing wall. For folks just listening in the podcast, just imagine the most campaigny of rooms. There's also a used large couch, which is always a campaign feature. Yes.
All you need is a potluck and you are officially in a campaign office. All right, Ben. So we want to talk to you this week because there was some big news out of Wisconsin. Senator Ron Johnson said he is going to run again. I thought he had pledged to not run for a third term. Why did he lie? What's up with the change of heart?
Well, lying and breaking promises is like breathing air for Ron Johnson. So in some ways, the fact that he promised not to run for a third term is not a surprise. But when I look at what he's done over the last dozen years, he'd been in the Senate. He ran as Mr. kind of pragmatic businessman. And after he got reelected in 2016, after his closing argument was that he wouldn't run again, he got to the Senate and worked with Donald Trump to get his tax bill passed. And, lots of Republicans voted for the tax bill. But Johnson stood out because he actually refused to vote for the tax scam, which was a massive giveaway to people at the top, until he convinced Donald Trump to add a specific carve-out for something called a designated S Corp. And a designated S corporation happens to be the exact kind of corporation that Ron Johnson owns.
Interesting.
It is interesting, right? And it's something he knows a lot about. And it's the kind of corporation, as it turns out, that his biggest donors own. The Uline family and Diane Hendricks. They're right-wing billionaires in Wisconsin. Between the Richard and Liz Uline and Diane Hendricks, they gave away $84 million to Republican donors in the last election cycle. They put $20 million into his 2016 race in a super PAC.
Wow.
And that the year after the tax bill passed, after Ron Johnson got his dream loophole added to Trump's tax bill because it didn't already give away enough money to rich people, the year after Johnson got his dream tax loophole added, the Ulines and Diane Hendricks walked away with more than $200 million in 1 year. That's a
great investment.
It's a 10-to-1 return in a single year. It's like a cryptocurrency accessible only to right-wing billionaires.
That's nice. It's a hell of a kickback. I want to do more about the Johnson rap sheet because there's a lot of members of Congress who are not quite tethered to reality, and he's sort of in the upper echelon. But real quick, Johnson announced his change of heart, his flip-flop in the Wall Street Journal. Is that a popular newspaper in Sheboygan? What'd you make of that?
He knows his audience. I'm sure it's not just Diane, the Wisconsin right-wing billionaire class that enjoys reading the Wall Street Journal op-eds where he penned his campaign announcement. He actually, Madison, Wisconsin is not like a right-wing bastion, but his campaign office, his constituent office in Madison is located on Wall Street in Madison, which is an address that I didn't even know we had a Wall Street until I went to his office and discovered that that's where he'd managed to locate it. So I think he's sending a big flashing signal for whose side he's on, and it is not the good people of the state of Wisconsin.
So I mean, we talk. There's so many members of Congress who are just a mess, right? We got Marjorie Taylor Greene, we got Matt Gaetz. I mean, it's hard to keep track. What's the rap sheet on Ron Johnson? Why do you think he's uniquely dangerous?
So here's the thing about Ron Johnson. He makes huge national news for being just the worst of the worst conspiracy theory monger, claiming that there was no insurrection on January 6th, saying that he would have been scared if it had been Black Lives Matter protesters, but he was never scared because it was patriots who loved their country and loved law enforcement. That was his literal quote about the people who beat up cops with an American flag. He has called climate change, the idea of climate change BS. He has gone out of his way in a million ways. He was the guy, opposing Juneteenth being a federal holiday. He was all these things that are just patently offensive. But
you said that excess carbon in the atmosphere helps the trees grow.
Yes, what carbon dioxide does is it helps trees grow. He claimed that Greenland. Anyway, there's a lot of things like that, and it's easy to just focus on those. But the thing about Johnson is that with one hand, he's just stirring things up and saying horrible stuff that in some cases has lethal consequences, like his huge championing of conspiracy theories about COVID-19 and pushing vaccines on anyone. That's the way he describes it. But on the other hand, he's just lining his own pockets. He's picking the pockets of Republican constituents and Democratic constituents and non-voters and independents alike. He's a venal, self-serving politician who is dressing himself up as a truth-telling messiah from some right-wing utopia, and the bait and switch, the kind of like the corruption at the heart of that equation, is the thing that is actually dynamite for Republican voters. And I think as we look at this guy who is right there at the front of the attack on democracy, who's calling on our state legislature to unilaterally seize control of election administration in the state of Wisconsin. And we have the most gerrymandered, horrific right-wing state legislature you can imagine. While he's doing all that, why does he want to rig the system? He wants to rig it so that people like him can stay in power and give more money to people like him. And that's like, it's not just that he is completely out to lunch and completely out on the fringe. It's that he's actually profoundly corrupt in the kind of the venal politician sense of corruption. And so many voters, even if they kind of maybe agree with him about ivermectin or whatever, if they hear that he's ripping them off and that he's, the stuff he's doing behind closed doors, actually, he's trying to block the stimulus checks for people, trying to block the child tax credit. He's one of only 6 senators to vote against the ban on surprise medical bills. He is like the most in the pocket of all the worst special interests. That stuff actually costs him support from what he would hope to be his base, at the same time as he tries to, appeal to the worst instincts of the worst parts of the American political discourse.
Opposing a bipartisan bill to ban surprise medical bills is a strange vote if you want to win. You mentioned this. So, Johnson wanted the state legislature to take control over federal elections. What would that have meant in practice? And can you talk about the response even from some Republicans in the state?
This is like so far outside of the bounds of democracy, I guess you could say, because changing who runs the elections requires a bill that needs to be passed into law by going through the state legislature and then being signed by the governor. That's how states work. He just wants the state legislature to assert that it has a constitutional right to do whatever it wants and seize control. And state legislators were aghast. The public was totally aghast. Every editorial board that commented on it thought this is a horrific idea. But he fundamentally doesn't believe that voters should decide who runs our government. This is, he was opposing the certification of electoral college votes until the insurrection had actually crashed into the U.S. Senate. Then he put that aside for a few hours and was right back feeding the big lie right afterwards. If our state legislature got control, we've seen in lots of different ways what they would do. They've already passed a slew of laws to crack down on all the things that people did to try to vote safely during the pandemic. They have passed a law through the state legislature that would restrict access to drop boxes. They would require that you take a photo of your voter ID every single time you request an absentee ballot, even for primary and then a general election, even if your ID is already on file. All these things, the governor has vetoed all of these rules. But he wants the state legislature to have carte blanche outside of the bounds of law. And there's really no constraint based in reality or our constitution or common sense or data or science that affects what he aims for. What he aims for is things that consolidate power for people like him. And that is exactly why he shouldn't have that power. It's because it's so contrary to the fundamental idea of how this country is supposed to work. Unfortunately, it does work that way sometimes, but it should not. And that's the reason why we're organizing so intensively and have been for the whole last year, even before he announced, to make sure he doesn't get another term.
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned Tony Evers, a Democratic governor, and some of the things he's vetoed. He's up as well. What's at stake in that race? So
if you are concerned about the future of American democracy, you have to zero in on exactly how it is that Republicans would overturn a presidential election. And it really comes down to a handful of states. The last 2 presidential elections have been super close. In each election, there were 3 states that got the winner over the top. And Wisconsin was the only state that was on both of those lists. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan in 2016, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia in 2020. Wisconsin was the tipping point state in both elections. And the reason why democracy prevailed in 2020 is that we had a Democratic governor in Wisconsin in 2020 who didn't throw the election to Trump or support its overturning. There's a woman named Rebecca Clayfish who's running for governor of Wisconsin. She was Scott Walker's lieutenant governor. She famously negotiated the giant Foxconn deal. She's.
How'd that go?
Do you remember when that Senate candidate said that rape survivors should turn lemons into lemonade, and that's why there shouldn't be an exception for rape and incest in abortion laws?
Oh my God, someone said that?
Yes, Rebecca Clayfish quote tweeted that and said, like, she's telling it like it is. Like,
oh my God,
she's just an extreme, really radical far right Republican candidate. But she is saying that she would actually sign a law to do what Ron Johnson says should happen, to give the state legislature control of our elections. And she was asked directly if she would sign a bill that would allow the state legislature to overturn an election result. And she said it would be premature to comment. We set up a website called radicalrebecca.com when she launched, and she started talking about radicalrebecca.com on the campaign trail. This is like she's running as the candidate of the most extreme of the extreme fringe. If she wins, then it becomes much, much harder to have confidence that democracy actually will function at its most basic level in 2024. And Governor Evers is absolutely rock solid. A veto of any threat, anything that makes it harder to vote, anything that makes an election less free and fair and secure. I mean, for people in Wisconsin, the stakes are good schools. He's got our schools back in the top 10 after Scott Walker and Rebecca Clayfish looted the public school system. Roads, he's paved 1,000 miles of roads. Healthcare, he's great on pre-existing conditions. All the stuff that affects Wisconsinites' lives. But for the whole country and the whole world, the Wisconsin governorship can actually affect whether we have a democracy at all. We have to win. We have to reelect Tony Evers. We have to win the governorship in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Let's elect Stacey Abrams. Let's elect a Democratic governor in Arizona. That becomes the firewall to make sure Republicans can't actually overturn the election results. Get obsessed with governorships. Get obsessed with reelecting Tony Evers is my advice for friends of democracy. And while we're at it, let's take out Ron Johnson.
I like that.
That's our to-do list.
That's a great to-do list. So, although I know you're obsessed with the governor's race, I know you're obsessed with taking out Ron Johnson, but I also know you are focused on countless smaller mayoral and county level positions. Can you give us some examples of local races in Wisconsin that we're never ever going to read about in the newspaper, but you're super focused on, and why you think those are important? Basically, what I'm trying to do is get you to inspire by proxy a bunch of people outside of Wisconsin to give a shit about the county clerk of, whatever, or the mayor of blah, blah, blah.
I would be more than delighted. So, and let me say, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking about how you can have an impact on things, go to wisdems.org/donate and chip in. Good. If you care about Ron Johnson, why not go to wisdems.org/Ron Johnson, become a monthly donor, support the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, and go to wisdems.org/volunteer, because we need your time and your treasure and your talent. And this spring, on April 5th, there will be local elections across the state of Wisconsin that will help shape how elections run in the fall of 2022, and thus whether we have a democracy in the fall of 2024. So when you're thinking about this huge national crisis of democracy, I want you to think about the mayor of the city of Darlington in Lafayette County, Wisconsin. I want you to think about the mayor of Dodgeville in Iowa County, Wisconsin. The mayor of the city of Rice Lake in Barron County, Wisconsin. These offices have enormous effects on who becomes the municipal clerk. In Wisconsin, we have one of the two most decentralized election administration systems in the country. We have more than 1,800 municipal clerks, city clerks, who administer the elections in those cities. And those people matter enormously for whether the right to vote actually has meaning for the people who live there. We can't let Bannonite, stop the stealer authoritarians take charge of local election administration systems.
And just to be clear, as listeners to the show know, I listen to Steve Bannon's show all the time. He is day after day after day telling his folks to go and run for office, run for the school board, volunteer for these local municipal elections, because he wants to set up a scenario where those MAGA brainwashed people are in charge and can actually steal the next vote. Like that is their plan. They talk about it in the light of day every day on his podcast.
Literally, I mean, there are two counties in Wisconsin that actually flipped in 2020 relative to 2016. They flipped by like a couple percentage points. There's Sauk County and Door County. And in Sauk County, one of the larger municipalities is the city of Reedsburg. Reedsburg is, it's not New York City. It is not Detroit. It has 9,508 people. But guess what? The total margin in the presidential race in 2020 in Wisconsin was 20,682. So you take a city of 9,508 people, and that matters a lot in determining what happens to the entire country. It's insane that our system is set up this way, but it is set up this way for now. So we have to fight in these races. And
yes, we do.
And we will be. And let me say one other thing. In Wisconsin, when you request an absentee ballot to vote for the mayor of Reedsburg, Wisconsin, you can request your absentee ballot. You can click a box on the myvote.wi.gov website and click a box to request absentee ballots for the entire year. And what that means is that every vote that we get out through absentee ballots in the spring election this year is a voter who we can get to be an absentee voter in the fall of 2022 as well. It means we're doing GOTV for the November elections while we're working on the spring election. And that is a super, super, super powerful thing. You don't have to wait until election day to actually get out the vote to win races up and down the ballot and save democracy. You can work on Wisconsin local elections this spring and do exactly that.
That's right. And, I know there's a primary in the Democratic side in the Senate race, so I will not ask you to choose between all the potential children that you will one day love, no matter who wins that race. But what people need to understand is I'm a monthly recurring donor to the Democratic Party in Wisconsin. It's the best money I spend every month. And it's a way that I can start working to defeat Ron Johnson right now, even before he has an opponent and there's a candidate to donate to, et cetera. So Ben, we talk often, like, what have you been doing? What has the Wisconsin Democratic Party been doing over the last year to prepare for today? And if, 100, 1,000 listeners decide to join me and become, recurring donors, give you $10, like, what else could you be doing? What's on your wish list that you wish you were getting done right now?
First of all, thank you. As a monthly recurring donor, you are powering the organizing juggernaut that is the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. And I want to say, you led the Wisconsin Adopt the State team for Pod Save America in 2020. The Adopt the Staters, the Pod Save America listeners who volunteered to support our work, like, legitimately turned out more voters than the margin of victory in Wisconsin. It's a giant gift and infusion of not just resources, but volunteer energy and time and talent and all of your humanity that helped win that election. So thank you. And what we did is in 2020, our organizing model, it's the Obama model. It's something you know very well. It's the model where our organizers actually build local teams across our state. So we have hundreds of local Democratic Party of Wisconsin neighborhood action teams all over Wisconsin that know every inch of their communities where they mobilize people. They have a contact in each apartment building who will let them in to knock on the door of people who just moved there. They, know which areas you got to have a driver who can drive the mile between farms to make sure that someone else can jump out and knock on the door. Those teams are still in place from 2020, and we organized all over Wisconsin throughout 2021. We had a spring election, which we won by 16 percentage points for the superintendent of public instruction against a candidate who got hundreds of thousands of dollars of dark money ads from Betsy DeVos. The Republican attack on education that happened in Virginia, they tried it in Wisconsin and it totally failed. And then in the fall, we went back on the doors. We actually knocked on the doors of and called and texted more voters in the fall of 2021 than we did in the fall of 2019 before the presidential election. So
wow.
We've been like more than twice as many. We've been building momentum, and all of that momentum will be necessary, but we're bursting into this year now with this kind of the infrastructure set to be able to scale up organizing this year. Now that the year has begun, every hour of someone's time that you volunteer with our party, every dollar that we can use to hire another organizer to build more teams, those folks can get folks to request absentee ballots for the entire year, to win the local elections this spring, and to turn out in the fall. Those folks can help us recruit and train and turn out poll workers who, this is another Bannonite obsession. Steve Bannon is trying to get far-right anti-democracy authoritarians to become poll workers and mess with people's right to vote. We're out organizing the right in poll worker recruitment because we have people in English and in Spanish recruiting poll workers, making sure they go through trainings. People can work the polls this spring. That qualifies them to move up the chain of command in the fall. We want people who believe in everyone's right to vote. We're not trying to suppress anyone's vote, but we want people who believe in democracy to be working the polls. It allows us to hire candidate services managers. So people who are running for these local offices, maybe they've run for something before or even served, but they've often never had a real contested election. And so we actually have staff that will help people set up their campaign website and figure out how to set up a Facebook page and figure out how to run some digital ads and get a list of the voters who they need to talk to, which, a lot of people don't realize that you can get. All of this stuff, it just takes human time to be able to do. And we have systems to scale it. But what that means is we can put money to work to actually support, dozens, hundreds of local candidates across the state in the course of this spring. And all of that work, all those people then become terrific staffers for state legislative races in the fall, because Republicans are going to shoot for supermajorities in our state legislature again. We know that that's their goal. So the impact of early support, of early contributions, of early hours volunteering, it has a multiplier effect. It echoes throughout this whole year, and it echoes from election cycle to election cycle. That's the power of a party that actually, it's like a battery that can get charged up with energy and then push it all out on election time. It's not something where you buy an ad, it airs once and it's gone. We actually are building something. And that's the reason why we've won 10 of the last 11 races in Wisconsin. And that is the thing we need to put every ounce of our energy into to win in the fall of 2022.
I think that's such an important point. And look, people listening to the show have given a lot of money. They've been asked by us to give a lot of money. We're so grateful for that. All the people who adopted a state, but it's just worth knowing what we're talking about here is not, an October donation to run an ad for a November election. You're talking about hiring one more person who's going to work for an entire year because of contributions that came in today and the multiplier of that. Ben, if we could clone your team, I think we would never lose another election. But give us the website one more time where people can donate, and then we'll let you go to dinner time or whatever you're doing with your family tonight.
WIS like Wisconsin, WIS, Dems like Democrats, DEMS. So it's WIS Dems. Your autocorrect will try to change it to Wisdoms. What even is Wisdoms? wisdems.org/donate or /volunteer. We're so grateful for all the support. And after you give and support us, join your local state party wherever it may be and go to your county party meetings and plug in, because this is the fight to win power at the local level and make sure Republicans can't shred our democracy from the bottom up. It's happening everywhere.
Yeah, and Steve Bannon's going to be there if you're not. Ben Wikler, thank you again. Thanks for all the work you're doing. Let's win this thing. And Ron Johnson sucks. End with that.
Thanks so much, Avi.